headlines that we're tracking, and we will come back to all of those individual stories. But first up, let's take a look at what's happening as far as the global picture is concerned. It is looking like a negative start for the Asian markets, right? So pretty much across the board, you're seeing a red screen for Asia. The Japanese market's down 150 points. Hang Seng is up on your screen around 100 points lower on that index as well. Taiwan again is seeing cuts of around 90 points over there. So it's looking like quite a weak start for the Asian markets, of course, reflecting the kind of losses that we saw on Wall Street as well. I'm going to take you through a few more. So Kospi also is down around 0.5% right now. So that one is seeing some cuts. Shanghai around 0.3% lower as well. The SGX Nifty will come up for you, and it is indicating a negative start for our own markets. It's not looking as bad as the rest of Asia right now, but it is around 17 points lower on the SGX Nifty. So that's what's happening in the Asian markets. But let's also talk about the US now. Wall Street ended Thursday's trading session lower after a 3-day winning streak. So the Dow Jones was mostly flat. The S&P 500 was off around 33 points. And the NASDAQ, that one was the big underperformer. It lost around 270 points at the close. CNBC's Kate Rooney is standing by to get us some more action from Wall Street.
U.S. markets closing mostly lower after a 3-day winning streak. That's despite jobless claims falling to its lowest level in more than 52 years. The Dow pretty much flat on the session, the S&P off 33 points, and the NASDAQ down 269. The world's most valuable digital bank making its initial public offering on the New York Stock Exchange today. Shares of Nubank opened at $9 and tacked on 14%, closing above $10 a share. The Brazilian bank was backed by 36 pre-IPO investors, including Warren Buffett's Berkshire Hathaway. American Airlines reducing international flights next summer. That's because of delayed deliveries of the Boeing 787 Dreamliner, which has faced ongoing manufacturing issues. Boeing will compensate American for the losses. Shares of Boeing and American Airlines down slightly on that news. And Starbucks employees in Buffalo voting to unionize after strong opposition from management. That's the first time a union will represent workers for the coffee chain in the U.S., and the company has resisted unionizing since going public nearly 3 decades ago. Shares of Starbucks down a little less than 1% on the session.
All right, Kate, thanks a lot for getting us all of that action from Wall Street. But sticking with the U.S. then, the important macro data from the United States. Weekly jobless claims for the week that ended on December 4th came in at a total of 184,000. This is the lowest in over 52 years. And all of this ahead of the week's CPI numbers, which are expected later today. CNBC's Rick Santelli is standing by to get us all of the highlights.
Initial jobless claims for the week of December 4th. 184,000, a nice drop, and so far no revision to last week's 222, and it is a post-COVID low. If we look at continuing claims, 1,992,000, 1,992,000. It is not a post-COVID low. Last week remains that way. This is the week of November 27th. It's always a week in arrears to initial claims, and last week, at least at this point, still unrevised. Well, there it goes. It's not revised. 1,954,000. So it's still a bit lower, but these are pretty good numbers. Let's put it in some context. If we go back to March of 2020, continuing claims were 1,715,000. Not so far off. And if you look at all of 2019, as the Wall Street Journal did for us today, the average per week on initial claims was 218,000. So we are definitely getting in the right zone for these numbers. And maybe the most important issue is it's not so much about claims. It's more about employers are certainly reticent to let any employees go, considering we have basically a deficit of workers to put in those slots that remain open and can't find people to fill. This is a huge dynamic, but I would caution, this isn't a dynamic of the United States. It's a dynamic globally.
All right, Rick, thanks a lot for getting us all of those highlights. But that's what's happening globally. How will all of these overnight cues impact our own market? We have our research team joining in to take you through exactly that and tell you what the trade setup looks like this morning. Rima, Nupur, and Agam all join me now. Hi, guys. A very good morning to all of you. Rima, I'm going to come across to you first, as always. Take us through the cues that we should watch out for, because Wall Street has pulled back after 3 solid days.
Absolutely. So the global cues are muted. In fact, there are a lot of them to track. So first, in terms of the key indices performance in the US, the Nasdaq was down 1.7%, the S&P 500 losing close to about 0.7%, snapping a three-day winning streak. All eyes will be on the US November CPI inflation, which potentially could throw up a figure of 6.7%, according to estimates, the highest level in the last 40 years. That said, the economic data which came overnight, the data on initial jobless claims for the week ended 4th of December, was better than what the street was anticipating. Investors continue to watch, with the research coming out of Omicron. The latest study, which has been conducted by a Japanese scientist, has found the new strain to be 4.2 times more transmissible in the early stages. And as you pointed out, Evergrande issue continues to remain top of mind. For our own markets, it could be a sluggish start. That's what the SGX Nifty is suggesting. And yesterday, you had the FI selling about 1,600 crore in cash, while the DIIs bought 800 crores. Back to you.
Okay, Rima, thanks a lot for laying out all of those cues for us. But let's also talk about the stocks that we should keep on our radar today. And Nupur is standing by with that entire list. Hi, Nupur.
Good morning, Panja. Let me start with the big boy Reliance. The partly paid up shares of the company will be available for trading from today. This would mean increase in free float. Also, it will lead to positive adjustment in MSCI, FTSE Nifty weights in future given the increased free float. So keep an eye on that stock. 3 stocks from pharma space will be in focus. Spark as in company in its conference call indicated that they are focusing on cost control measures. Cash on hand currently is 12 crores. So watch out for that stock as well. Dr. Reddy launches one of its tablets in US. The market size for this particular tablet is around $51 million. So watch out for that as well. Marks and Pharma, where company gets UK MHRL approval for one of its capsule. So positive news coming in there as well. Moving on to then Bajaj Electricals, where company to review corporate structure to unlock value and also to consider housing power operation as separate entity. An update from BC Primary Market, where Shriram Properties IPO closes today. It subscribed 1.63 times so far. MapMy India IPO saw good response, subscribed 2.02 times on day 1. Metro Branch IPO will open today. And lastly, Star Health will list today.
Okay, Nupur, thanks a lot for taking us through that entire list. We will keep all of these on our radar. And finally, let me hand it over to Agam, who's looking at all of the cues from the futures and options space. Good morning.
Good morning. Well, the cues were a tad muted, but this is only in relation to what we've seen in the previous 3 days. What we did see in the Nifty futures is an increase of around 2.5%, and the Bank Nifty futures did see a little bit of unwinding coming through. A lot of the longs build up on the last 2 days were unwound as far as the Bank Nifty futures go, because the open interest declined by around 3.3%. There wasn't as much activity from in terms of changes in the index futures from an FIR standpoint, because we did see them add about 1,100 contracts towards the long side and about 2,500 contracts towards the short side, but that still keeps their long positioning at around 70% mark. 72% mark. Moving on in terms of the most active options, well, we are moving into the new expiry, so the range is a little broader for now. 17,500 on the lower end, where we did see a lot of writing in puts, and 18,000 on the upper end, where we saw writing in calls. But do remember, these two options also have the most in terms of open interest at this point in time. And finally, coming down to a couple of stocks. First source, GMR Infra and Granules see fresh longs.
Okay, Agam, Rima, Nupur, thanks a lot for joining us and prepping us up for this trading session. But with that, we get into our first short break in this show. Up next, footwear retailer